Hello everybody from sunny Germany. Today we're going to do a couple of things where I'm going to summarize some stuff that we've covered so far. Then we're going to have a look at the terminal command line prompt. And then we're also going to have a look at what we covered in the last video, which was array list collections. And finally, we are also going to take a look at more errors, which is very important because we started talking about things that were happening during execution time and things that were happening at compile time. And when things happen at compile time, then obviously you get a compile time error, compiler error, and what things mean and things like that. Because I'm sure when you can't get feedback from a computer like you can from a human when you're speaking a language, it can be really frustrating trying to figure it out. So if you understand the errors inside out, then you can figure out the different things in your code that are causing these errors, and that's why it's good to understand this stuff. So summary first. Arrays we had a look at first, and they were fixed length data structures, and they're consisting of related data types, so they have to be in the same type. So we had int open square bracket close square bracket, and that was an integer array, and then the name of the array equals new, and then int, and then the open bracket square bracket and whatever the length of the array is. And then with the new, we know that it creates a new object at execution time, which we'll come to at the end of this video when we talk about the errors. So I already did some errors in a previous video. I will link that below. And now we are going to just continue on with the rest of the summary. So we looked at array access expressions and array creation expressions, and the array creation expression was just what I described there with the new. And a program refers to any one of the array's elements with the array access expression, and that includes the name of the array followed by the index in the square brackets. And then the first element of the array has the 0th element, which is accessible via the open square bracket and 0 in it. An index is a non-negative integer, and a program can use an expression as an index as well, because we already put in, let's say if we had an integer number defined already, we can put that in as the length, and that's also as the length, or we can refer to a different integer and put it in as well. An array object knows its own length, yay, and stores this information in the length instance variable, so accessible with the name of the array and then dot length. To create an array object, then we always use the access creation expression with new, or we use the initializer lists, which we already had a look at as well. And then when an array is created, each element receives a default value, and 0 for numeric, or false for boolean, or null for references. So a reference type object being a string, that will be null. That's where errors come in handy, because you could get a null pointer exception in that instance if you don't allocate a default. So in an array declaration, the type and the square brackets combined are at the beginning of the declaration is what make it. And then a constant variables we had a look at as well, and we used the final keyword for that. And then we also took a look at the exception handling, and that's creating fault tolerant programs. And we gave an example of airplane programs, which is really, well, obviously that's really important. And so the downgrading of the program can't just stop, and that's why you need to have these throws and catches with the errors. So to handle an exception, you place any code that might throw an exception in a try statement, and then you have a catch afterwards, and that will handle the different scenarios. And so this is your try catch block, and when a try block terminates, any variables declared in the try block go out of scope. And so we already spoke about scope of variables. I will link that also below. And then an exception objects to string method returns the exceptions error message. Then we moved on to what we now know as the array lists, which was in the previous video. And we introduced collections, which is part of the Java APIs, and to make it more efficient to organize, store, and retrieve data. And they have to be of the same type, the same as the way arrays are, but array lists have the placeholder E, and they're dynamically resized. So it makes it really intuitive and easy, and everything that arrays are fixed and array lists aren't. So it's very good that they're dynamic. We also touched a little bit upon the fact that array lists, you can access ArrayList.add.remove.size, .trim to size, and .contains, which we didn't cover the .contains, but if you use the system.out .printf and then the ternary operator I said as an example. Then with the final part, which we had a talk about, which was the enhanced for statement, which we covered a lot of in the last while, and that allows you to iterate through the elements of an array or a collection using it without the counter. So you only use the enhanced for when you're using it without the counter. And then we then also talked about the multi-dimensional arrays, and the first thing that occurs first is row and then column. That's very important. It has to be in that sequence: rows first and then columns. A two-dimensional array has m rows and n columns, so it's an m by n array. And which we didn't talk about this kind of notation, but I'm introducing it as I'm going along because we didn't mention notation like m by n. But it's kind of mathematical, so I'm sure people will pick up some of this stuff as well. And an argument then typed followed by the ellipsis is the open round bracket and then 3 dots and then the perimeter list, and you can put in a variable length or argument list into this. So we used an example where we put in 3 different amounts of doubles they were, and then it was just called. Then we spoke about pass by value versus pass by reference. And when an argument is passed by reference, the called method can access the argument's value in the caller directly, possibly modify it. All arguments in Java are actually passed by value. And a method call can pass 2 types of values to the methods: a copy of primitive types or a copy of the references to objects. And although an object's references pass by value, a method can still interact with the reference object by calling its public methods using the copy of the object's reference. So when you pass an array or an individual array element of a reference type to a method, the called method receives a copy of that array or element's reference. And when you pass an individual element of a primitive type, the called method receives a copy of the element's value. And then to pass an individual array element to a method, you use the index name of the array. And now we are going to look at the previous example as well, which is the array list collections. So we have our array list collections here. We said it was array list, similar to the same syntax that we used for arrays. So we have array list, then we have our name. We introduced the diamond operator, which is new in this case, and that's a little bit different to what we've covered so far, but that puts in your type. So for an array, it was square brackets. For an array list, it's the diamond operator and then the name. And then the new object creates something at execution time, not at compile time, because we would get a compiler error in that case. And we had a look at the fourth statement here, which was looping through to get the counter. Here we have an inbuilt .get, .add, .remove, .add, and they're all inbuilt methods within the Java API for this data structure that is an array list. So I said at the start of this video as well that I would have a look at the command line arguments as well. So if we open up our terminal window, so to change directory, we have cd, or to list things in a directory of ls. So I'm listing it, and then I'm changing my directory to git for my workspace. I can list my projects in git. Then I change directory again to what is in it, array command, oh no, array command it is. And you can tab across as well. And then if I list this, and then if I cd https, or if you know the exact where it actually is, then you can also just change directory to the full name of where it is as well. So now we are in it, array command list. So it should be in the source file that I'm going to. So now to compile our things within Java, we use the command javac, and then init array.java. Once that's compiled, then we use the command line prompt. Oh, and now that's our first error. So including the array size, initial value, and increment. So when we called the constructor, this is known as a compiler error or it's compiled already, so it's a runtime error. So after it's run, you can see here the error, please enter. So if I've specified the argument here, error, please re-enter the entire command with the initial value. So I can show you as well the other error that happens. So if I put in, for instance, it's expecting an integer. So if I put in 555 for instance, then it will get also an error here. So number format exception, because it's the wrong type. This is why types, when they're matching, it should be specific. So we have an integer type, and we also spoke about yesterday about boxing, because integers are usually primitive types, but if we want to use them as a reference type, which means if you think about it this way, it's not exactly true, but if you think about it this way, it means that you can use methods associated with that. So you box it and then you unbox it. So here we have our integer with a capital I, and that makes it a reference type. And then by using it as a reference type, then we can use methods associated with it. And in this instance, we have integer.parseInt, and then pass comments to it as well. So here, if we go back here, and let's say if I only put in one parameter, then we have another, this will catch our argument length exception because we have it already within the code. But if I put in, say, a string as well, it's also going to give me a number format exception. What else can I do? Here we have our index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the value for 8, 12, 16, and 20. And we spoke the last day just a tiny bit about the order of precedence when you're calculating the stuff, because when we're using the for statement down here, the multiplication comes first, and that's the order of precedence. So I think I use the acronym BIMDAS, so that's brackets, indices, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. And this is why we learn maths in school, because we need to know these things for now. So we have our, also, if I was, so for instance, here we have another error that we can make happen. So if I go back to my terminal and then compile it again, we are, it shouldn't give me a compiler error because it doesn't, the array length, it doesn't pick up that it's a compiler error. So if I pass that through, it should, oh, still worked. I have to build it first. So I have Java init array 544, but actually I forgot to save it. That's important. And then if I go back and do it again, now if I compile, it should still be fine because it's at execution time that this error will happen. There we go. Array index out of bounds, index 5 out of bounds for length 5, because, and it tells you what line it's on, Java 17. So if I go here, here is my line 17. You can add line numbers if it's not, sometimes in the IDEs, in the integrated development environments, you don't have the line numbers. So that is a very, very, very common error that a lot of people do because they run out of that. So now if I save it, first the star up at the very top will show you when it's saved and when it's not saved. So if I do something here, you can see here int array, and when there's a star here, then it's not saved. So if I save it now and go back and compile, and then run, and ta-da, no error for array index out of bounds exception. That's a really important error because everyone seems to to make it when you're less than, you're not including the array, like, so the counter is going from the index and the array length is a different number. So if you think of it, the array length could be 10, and that's in the array creation expression that we've defined it as 10 elements are in that array. But the index goes from 0 to 9. So in the for loop, the index goes from 0 to 9. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But the length is 10 elements. But we don't want to go to 10 because it's going to mismatch. It's going to say, uh-oh, the index is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the length is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so it has to be less than 10, which is 9. So you can see here then that makes a big difference. 0. Here I can also change the int counter, and you can see also another thing that happens with this, and I have saved it already. Compile, run, and you can see here that the counter here is only assigning from, see there's no value then. So it's pushed it off by 1. That's also an error, but it's a logical error. So when we spoke about errors, we had spoken about the different types of errors in a previous video. I will link that below. But this is actually going to not be noticeable to the program because it's not, it's still within the bounds of 1 and under 10, so 1 and 9 for the index. But it's, so not 1 and 9 in this case, it's going to be 1 and 0 and 4, so 5 is the length of it, of the array length. But here there's no value associated with the 0th element, and that's going to cause then a error later on. So if you see here, you've got index and then value is 4, but it just doesn't output it then. So that's it for today. I'll do another video on errors because they're really important, and there's different types of errors. There's runtime errors, and there's compiler errors, and then there's logical errors. And I already spoke about the different types of errors in the previous video, link below. And yeah, thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. Hope you enjoy them. I love doing these videos. So speak to you soon. Bye.